All right. We are recording. Let's start off with the first attendance word. In this case, it's not any particular word, it's just a category. So instead of sending a word, send your favorite card game or board game. Um, doesn't matter what it is. Obviously, I have no way of knowing if it's actually your favorite. Doesn't really matter. Just choose a card game or a board game. And if you can't pick a favorite, just pick one that you like. That's the first word for attendance. Now let's jump into it. I'm going to do it kind of like I did last week. I'm not going to cover the mistakes that were made from the last module because off the top of my head, they were essentially the exact same mistakes I warned people about in our last meeting. So if you're curious as to what the mistakes were, you can go watch the video from last week because all those mistakes I said be careful not to make. Those are the ones they made. But that being said, since we're not going to cover anything from Module 5, does Tang, do you have any questions about anything that we did or your grading or anything from the last module before we jump into what to expect for this week? I'll give it a couple seconds because I know last time you were typing instead of speaking, so I just want to make sure you're not typing something up right now and give you some time to type it up if you are. All right, I guess there's no questions. In that case, let me share my screen and let's talk about what to expect for 6. All right, no questions. Perfect. Thanks. This one should be pretty straightforward. This module. In this case, I kind of recommend doing the lab before you do the discussion because the lab is all about water pollution and it's only. Well, yeah, let's talk about that first of all. The lab is just about water pollution. This is, and again, it's kind of like an easier week. Um, all you have to do this week is watch about 1 hour and 52 minutes worth of videos, which makes sense because remember, like I've said before, and I want to reiterate this, if this were not an online class, we would meet once a week for 16 weeks and have a 1 hour and 50-minute lab, right? So that's expected. That's a normal thing for our courses, for a 4 semester hour course. However, we are taking an 8-week course, right? So you've got all that time crammed into 8 weeks, which means in theory, right, we should be doing 2 1 hour and 50-minute labs per week. Obviously, that's not my intention. So again, if you're thinking that 1 hour and 52 minutes is a very long video, I just wanted to give that some context, right? So in all actuality, it's not that long. Plus, again, my goal here was to make it a little bit easier. I mean, it might be long, but all you have to do is watch the video while answering some questions. And that being said, there are some options, as you can read right here. You can either watch one documentary that's 1 hour and 52 minutes long, or you can watch this video, Blue Gold Water World Water Wars. It's about 1 hour and a half. And then also, in addition to that shorter video, you can watch one of these shorter videos as well. So this or this, right? Blue, gold, or flow for the love of water. And then in addition, you'll have to watch this shorter one, the big oyster. So hopefully that makes sense. If not, let me know. And that's it, right? You're just going to watch videos while answering questions. As always, I'll remind you the answers need to come from the video. Those questions are just there for proof that you're paying attention in the video. There are no important questions about concepts in there. It's just all about making sure that you watch the video. But are there any questions about this week's lab? Nice and simple. Another thing I'll say, and most people won't hear this, I think, because I have a feeling most people aren't watching these videos based on the mistakes I'm seeing. But for those of you who do watch the video, I'll just go ahead and let you know the due date for this, even though it'll say in the system is due this Sunday like normal. But I want to let you know that the due date for this, I'm going to go ahead and unofficially change it to next Sunday because next week we're taking the week off for fall break. So as long as this is done before we start Module 7, and that won't happen until the week after fall break, then I don't care what the due date is. So there's that. And again, I assume there's no questions for the lab, so we'll move forward to the discussion. Anyway, like I was saying earlier, speaking of which, I kind of recommend doing this lab first because then you can watch these documentaries. and get a little bit of understanding, a little bit more of an understanding about water pollution. And that might give you a more informed opinion to answer these questions. And the question is basically saying, do you support laws that regulate the collection of storage of rainwater? Why or why not? So that's, it's pretty straightforward. Answer that question and then defend your answer. I don't know, maybe there's an age gap here. I don't know what it's like for you younger people. Um, but I know, for example, when I'm on social media, I have a lot of people who like to argue. I see a lot of arguing. People just love to argue on social media. So think about it that way. If that's something that you see, or if you happen to partake in, think of this discussion like that, right? You're out here trying to make an argument, right? Should there be laws that regulate this? Make an argument. Find some data. Explain why you think they should or should not. And again, then once you've made your argument, you need to make sure you specify if you're talking about a specific region or if you're talking about the entire United States. It's pretty straightforward. But I'm gonna go ahead and read this too, though, because this is important. I want to make sure this is understood. Like almost every issue, like almost every environmental issue, there are pros and cons to both sides, right? So if we're talking about collecting rainwater or not collecting rainwater, they both have their pros and cons. Therefore, when you write your post, make sure you explicitly include the pros and cons of your position. So even if you're arguing that we should not collect rainwater, obviously you're going to talk about the pros of not collecting rainwater, but then you still have to recognize the fact that there still are cons to your idea. So make sure you talk about the pros and the cons. Obviously, you choose one over the other because in your mind the pros outweigh the cons. But still, we have to recognize there are negatives, right? It's not just all positives. There's no completely perfect solution. Everything has its downside. So make sure you include that. You will be receiving 1 point per advantage and 1 point per disadvantage. That's what it says on paper. I'm not sure if I'm going to be that strict with it, but the point is, again, you're trying to make an argument, so make sure you're listing the pros and cons. On a similar note, make sure at least one of your advantages and actually I should change that and disadvantages, right? So again, you're doing advantages and disadvantages. Make sure that at least one of each has not been listed by another student. In other words, make sure at least one of your ideas is unique. And yes, that does require you to read other people's posts before you do yours. But again, that'd be like 1 point. You might lose 1 point. And if I'm being completely honest with you, I'm not going to go back and check everybody's papers. So you're only probably going to lose a point for that if I've seen that idea so much that by the time I get to reading your papers, I just know it without having to look back. I just know that people have listed that those pros and cons. Then that's the only way you'll lose a point. And I guess since we keep saying this word so much, that will be the next word for attendance. Cons, C-O-N-S. Next word for attendance to prove that you are paying attention in the meeting and or paying attention while you're watching this video at a later date. In addition to your initial post, reply to 2 other students. And again, I've unofficially changed that. I haven't changed the wording yet because this is the first semester where I'm doing this, but you can only, if you want to, you can reply to just 1 student. So instead of it being worth 5 points, it'd be worth 10 points by arguing against one position or supporting another. For 1 reply, ensure that you are replying to a student who shares. Oh, say this is a little bit hard. So again, if you decide to do more than 1 reply for extra points, which I recommend, you want to change it up, right? So for 1 reply, ensure that you're replying to a student who shares your opinion. And then for your other reply, you want to choose someone who doesn't share your opinion, right? And then you're going to argue against it. Yeah, so that's it. So then really quickly, let's just look at this, the nuts and bolts here. As always, I always recommend this. I feel like people aren't looking at these, but this is what you need to look at. Like right, before and or after you write your post, look at these things to see, make sure you've done all of these line item direction, so to speak, right? You want to make sure you're not missing any points. Obviously, you don't want any errors. Emotion rather than logic. We've talked about that before. Here we go. This is more specific to this discussion. Explicitly indicate that you do or do not support the laws that regulate collecting rainwater. So, for example, you don't want to just write a post that just talks about the pros and cons, but then you don't actually offer your opinion. So Make sure you do offer your opinion. Or more importantly, because that's usually not a mistake people make. People are usually pretty good at saying, I think they should or should not regulate it, right? People are pretty good at that. But historically, this is where people mess up. They don't include the advantages of collecting rainwater, which we talked about earlier. They don't include the disadvantages of collecting rainwater. And here's another big one. I'll point this out. Obviously, when we're talking about advantages and disadvantages, it's not everything we talk about in this course is not all about the environment, right? There's other things to consider, like the economy, for example. But since this is an environmental biology class, you do need to include at least one environmental advantage or disadvantage, right? So if you're talking about collecting rainwater and you focus on how much money it costs to set the system up and how much money it saves you in the long run, and how much money it might save the local government, right? That's good. Those are good points to make. But keep in mind, this is an environmental biology class, so you do need to at least mention the biology. Excuse me, the environmental advantages and or disadvantages. And then finally, again, like I said, when you list your advantages and disadvantages, you need to have at least one that's unique, right? So this is all right there. Yeah, so all the stuff I already said, and man, I hate to beat this dead horse, but people are still not doing this. You have to properly use sources in your initial post and your reply, right? You have to do this. If you don't know what I mean by properly using your sources, click the link, read the thing. I've said it before, I'm beating a dead horse. Most likely I'm also preaching to the choir, because if you're watching this video, you're probably already on top of things and doing stuff correctly. Really quickly for the responses, let's see, anything new here? Nah, people generally historically have done pretty good with the responses in this discussion. So once again, yeah, I've already talked about the important stuff for this discussion, and once again, have to use sources for your discussions. So do you have any questions about the discussion? All right. Once again, like I mentioned about the lab, since we have yeah, since we have fall break next week, I'm extending unofficially, because I'm not going to put it in writing. This is just for people who watched the video and got the lowdown. I'm unofficially extending the due date, right? So the initial post will still be due on Wednesday, as always, but your reply will, instead of being due this coming Sunday, will be due the Sunday after that. Finally, that leads me to this for the exam. Same thing. The exam, I'm extending the due date to next Sunday. So not this coming Sunday, but next Sunday. And as always, you have 50 questions, excuse me, about 50 questions. Then you have 50 minutes to take it. I will share the study guide when I share this video. And as always, if you need more time to take it, just meet me online. Because if I can see you and hear you and see your screen and ensure that you're taking a closed book exam, then I don't care how long it takes you to take your exam. And that's it for stuff specific to Module 6. So really quickly, I just want to remind you of a few things that I don't think enough people are taking advantage of. And once again, I'm probably preaching to the choir. The people who are failing or close to failing could really use this advice. Remember, if you meet me online and get detailed feedback for any assignment, including quizzes, exams, whatever it may be, I will give you at least a 5% boost to that grade. So take advantage of that, because one, that helps you learn. Two, that'll help you be more prepared for the third and final exam. And then three, obviously, again, a 5% boost could really help your grade. And then finally, and I know once again, I'm beating a dead horse here, but why don't you find some time to meet me online, right? If you're doing an assignment, before you turn it in, just say, hey, shoot me an email. Say, hey, is there any chance you can meet me online between this time and this time? And let me just look it over. It won't take me long. And I could just say, yeah, this needs fixed, this needs fixed, this needs fixed. And if you need help fixing those things, you can do it. That'll save me a lot of time in grading, because grading perfect papers, perfect assignments is a lot quicker. And obviously that'll save you a lot of time and also improve your grades. So please let me help you. I'm here to help. And then finally, I guess the last thing I want to mention and remind everybody is there's a list of extra credit opportunities. You can find it in the announcements. But basically, this is the when you find the link, this is where it links you to. So it explains how extra credit works. But then if you scroll down here, there's a whole list of extra credit ideas. So I highly recommend doing those extra credit things. One thing I would like to reiterate is the one about where is it at? Watch videos, recycle, pick up litter. Yeah, this one. So I will give you money or not money. Sorry, I wish I gave you money. I would give you extra credit if you pick up litter, right? And I wish I would have reiterated this earlier in the semester. But if you go out there and clean some stuff up, you'll get at least 5 points of extra credit. And you can read that for details. Also, you can contact me. There's ways to get more than 5 points if you do other things. But yeah, that's it. So if anybody has any questions, let me know. I guess the last word for attendance will be the word litter. And before I go, I'll just ask really quickly if you have any questions. Oh, see, I didn't hear all these. So let me read these. No questions. That's a good question. So I assume, when I was talking about giving you a 5% boost to your grade. Yes. Just because you have an A doesn't mean it's a perfect score, right? So yes, you could still get a boost. Likewise, sometimes even if you have a 100%, you still might be able to get a boost because even again, sometimes you might have a perfect score, but you didn't necessarily do it perfect, right? I'm not just despite what it might seem like, because I know it seems like I'm picky, but there's a lot of stuff where I don't mark points off. Um, like room for improvement, but you didn't lose points. So yes, you can get those points. You can still get the boost in many situations. And that made me think of one more thing. What was it? The boost. Oh yeah, and then I guess we'll be done after that. That's a good time to remind you that the earlier you turn things in, the better. I'm generally speaking, I'm less strict with grading when things are turned in earlier. So the later and later they get turned in, the more strict I become and the more picky I become. I guess that's a better word. And I do that for a couple reasons. One is to encourage you to turn things in early. Two, it's to um, reward you for turning things early. Three, I'm being less strict or less picky because you did it so quickly that I would expect, I might expect more mistakes from you. Conversely, if somebody waits until Sunday night, in theory, they've had all week to work on it. So I would expect their work to be better. And then the last one, and if I'm being completely honest, is I know people cheat. So a lot of times I might let something slide when someone turns in something on Tuesday. And then that way, if somebody copies their work and then turns the same thing in on Friday, they might lose, they might lose points that the original person didn't lose, but that's what they get for cheating. Yes, the question is, did you say that the lab is due next Sunday too? Yes, the lab is due next Sunday. The exam is due next Sunday, and the quiz is due next Sunday. So everything is due next Sunday. Yeah, just so you can have less stress. And that's it. Do you have any other questions? All right, I will take that as a no. And if anybody needs me, you know how to find me. Have a great week.